The night was storming and dark. The only sound that could be heard was the pitter-patter of raindrops against the window. Inside the old creaky mansion, a group of friends had gathered for a weekend of fun and adventure, completely unaware of the horrors that awaited them. As they sat in the dimly lit living room, sipping on hot cocoa, one of the friends, Gary, suggested they play a game of truth or dare. The others agreed, and soon they were all taking turns asking each other questions and performing dares, trying to outdo each other. But as the night wore on, the questions and dares became darker and more sinister, and the group began to feel uneasy. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging them into complete darkness. "Guys, this isn't funny," one of them said, her voice trembling. "Who turned off the power?" "I didn't do it," another replied. As they sat in silence, trying to adjust to the darkness, they heard a faint whispering sound coming from one of the rooms upstairs. They all looked at each other in terror, wondering what could be making the noise. "Let's go check it out," Gary said, trying to sound brave. The group slowly made their way up the stairs, their hearts pounding heavily. As they reached the top of the staircase, they saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway, its back turned to them. "Who are you?" one of them asked, her voice trembling. The figure slowly turned around, revealing a face that was twisted in a grotesque expression. Its eyes glowed a fiery red, and its mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth. The group screamed and ran back down the stairs, but the figure followed them, its long, bony fingers reaching out to grab them. The friends stumbled and tripped over each other as they raced back down the stairs, their breaths ragged and panicked. "What is that thing?" Amy yelled, her voice quivering. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," Gary shouted, his heart pounding faster and faster. They burst into the living room, their faces pale and their eyes wide with terror. The room was still shrouded in darkness, the rain outside continuing to pound against the windows. "We need to find a way to defend ourselves," Mark said, his voice shaky as he scanned the room for any potential weapons. "Look, there's a fireplace," Kara pointed out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we can find something to use as a weapon." They rushed over to the fireplace and began searching for anything that could help them. A metal poker and a broken chair leg were the only things they could find. Clutching their makeshift weapons, they huddled together, their eyes fixed on the entrance to the living room. The figure slowly emerged from the hallway, its menacing grin widening as it moved closer. The room seemed to grow colder, and the air was thick with an oppressive, malevolent energy. "Stay back!" Gary shouted, his voice quivering but determined. The figure continued its advance, its red eyes locked onto them. It let out a guttural, otherworldly growl that sent shivers down their spines. "Back off!" Amy yelled, her voice filled with a mix of fear and defiance as she brandished the metal poker. With a sudden burst of speed, the figure lunged toward them. They swung their makeshift weapons, managing to make contact with its form, but it seemed unaffected, its body shifting and contorting as if it were made of smoke. As the friends continued to fend off the figure, a sudden bolt of lightning illuminated the room, revealing a hidden trapdoor in the corner. "Over there!" Kara exclaimed, pointing at the trapdoor. "We have to get out of here!" With a renewed sense of urgency, they sprinted towards the trapdoor and managed to pry it open. Without hesitation, they descended into the darkness below, leaving behind the terrifying entity that had pursued them. They found themselves in a narrow, dimly lit corridor, their footsteps echoing as they hurried along. The corridor seemed to stretch on endlessly, and the further they went, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. "We can't keep running forever," Mark panted, his voice tense. "We need to find a way to stop that thing." "We have to find answers," Gary said, his determination evident. "There must be something in this mansion that can help us understand what we're dealing with." They pressed on, their hearts pounding and their minds racing with questions. What was the origin of the horrifying figure? Why had it targeted them? And most importantly, how could they escape its clutches and bring an end to the nightmare that had engulfed them? Little did they know, the mansion held dark secrets that were about to be unveiled, and their journey was far from over. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the mansion, the true horrors that awaited them were yet to be revealed. Suddenly, they heard voices coming from a room on their left. They paused, unsure of what to do. Should they investigate or keep moving forward? "I think we should check it out," Amy said, her voice barely audible. The others nodded in agreement, and they cautiously made their way towards the room. As they approached, they could hear the voices more clearly. It sounded like a group of people were gathered inside, talking in hushed tones. "Is it just me, or does this feel like a trap?" Mark whispered. "Maybe, but we have to take the risk," Gary replied, his eyes fixed on the door. They took a deep breath and pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with strange symbols and artifacts. In the center of the room, a group of hooded figures stood in a circle, their faces obscured by shadow. "What is this?" Kara whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Suddenly, one of the hooded figures turned towards them, revealing a face that was all too familiar. "Wait, that's our friend Tom!" Amy exclaimed, disbelief etched on her face. Tom stepped forward, his eyes filled with a strange, almost manic gleam. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice almost sing-song in its cadence. "What's going on, Tom?" Gary demanded, his makeshift weapon at the ready. Tom grinned, revealing a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You see, I made a deal, and now it's time to collect." The group backed away, their hearts pounding with fear and confusion. "What deal?" Kara asked, her voice shaking. Tom's grin widened and he stepped closer, his eyes locked onto theirs. "The deal for your souls," he said, his voice echoing through the room. The group screamed and ran out of the room, their minds reeling with disbelief and terror. As they fled down the corridor, they could hear Tom's laughter echoing behind them, and they knew that their journey was far from over. "What do we do now?" Mark gasped, his chest heaving. "We have to find a way out," Gary replied, his voice filled with determination. "We can't let Tom or whatever that thing was get to us." "But how do we get out?" Kara asked, her eyes scanning the corridor for any sign of an exit. "We keep moving forward," Amy said, her voice trembling but resolute. "We have to find a way out of this nightmare." They continued down the corridor, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. As they turned a corner, they saw a glimmer of light in the distance. "Look, there's an exit!" Gary exclaimed, his voice tinged with relief. They ran towards the light, their footsteps echoing through the corridor. As they reached the end of the corridor, they saw a door leading outside. "We made it!" Mark exclaimed, his voice filled with joy and relief. But as they opened the door, they realized that they had only escaped the mansion, not the horrors that awaited them. Outside, the storm raged on, and the darkness seemed to stretch on endlessly. "We have to keep moving," Gary said, his voice firm. "We can't stop now." The group nodded in agreement, and they set off into the storm, their eyes fixed on the horizon. As they trudged through the rain and the mud, they knew that they had to keep moving, no matter what lay ahead. For in this world of darkness and terror, they were the only hope they had. The wind howled around them as they pushed forward, the rain soaking them to the bone. Each step was a struggle, but the thought of what they had left behind pushed them to keep going. "We can't let fear control us," Amy said, her voice determined. "We have to find answers, put an end to this nightmare." "But how do we even know what's real anymore?" Kara mused, her voice tinged with doubt. "That figure, those hooded figures, Tom, it's all so surreal." "We can't let doubt cloud our judgment," Gary replied, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "We need to find shelter and regroup. Maybe we can uncover more about this curse that has befallen us." They stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin nestled in the woods. It looked weathered and worn, but it was their best chance for shelter. As they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted, and they felt a heavy sense of unease. "This place gives me the creeps," Mark muttered, his eyes darting around the dimly lit interior. "We don't have much of a choice," Gary said, his voice echoing their thoughts. "Let's search for any clues, any information that might help us." They began to explore the cabin, their fingers brushing against dusty surfaces and cobwebs. In a corner of the main room, they found an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. As they flipped through its entries, they discovered the horrifying truth about the mansion and the curse that had plagued it for generations. It says here that the mansion was built on an ancient burial ground, Amy read aloud, her voice trembling, and that a powerful entity was summoned, striking a dark bargain with those who sought its power. But how does this connect to us? Mark wondered aloud, his brow furrowed. The curse feeds on fear and negativity, Gary explained, his eyes narrowing. It preys on our vulnerabilities and seeks to consume our souls. We have to break this curse, Kara said, her voice determined. We can't let it control us any longer. With newfound resolve, they continued to read through the journal, discovering that the only way to break the curse was to confront their deepest fears and doubts head-on. Each member of the group had to face their personal demons and overcome the darkness that had taken hold of them. It won't be easy, Gary said, his voice steady, but we have each other, and we have to support one another through this. As they prepared to confront the horrors that awaited them, they felt a sudden shift in the air. The cabin seemed to come alive with an ominous energy, and they heard whispers in the shadows. It knows we're onto it, Mark said, his voice low. It's trying to stop us. We can't let it intimidate us, Amy said, her eyes blazing with determination. We have to face our fears, no matter how terrifying they may be. The group gathered in the center of the room, holding hands and closing their eyes. They began to visualize their fears, bringing them to the surface and acknowledging their existence. The room grew colder, and eerie shadows danced on the walls as they confronted their inner demons. Suddenly, the room erupted into a cacophony of nightmarish visions. Each member of the group faced their fears head-on, battling the manifestations that taunted them. Their minds and hearts were put to the test as they fought against the overwhelming darkness that threatened to consume them. But as they struggled, they realized that their bond was their greatest weapon. Their unwavering support for one another gave them strength, and slowly they began to push back against the malevolent forces that sought to break them. The storm outside raged on, mirroring the turmoil within the cabin. The battle between light and darkness raged within their minds and souls, each member of the group determined to emerge victorious. And just as it seemed that the darkness might overwhelm them, a brilliant burst of light filled the room, dispelling the shadows and banishing the horrors that had haunted them. They opened their eyes, their chests heaving with exertion, and looked around the now tranquil cabin. "We did it," Kara said, her voice filled with awe. "We faced our fears and conquered them," Amy added, a sense of accomplishment in her tone. As they stepped back outside, the storm had subsided, and the first rays of dawn were breaking through the clouds. "It's over," Mark said, a mixture of relief and exhaustion in his voice. "But the mysteries of that mansion, the curse and the entities we encountered," Gary mused. "They're all pieces of a larger puzzle. We need to find the answers, put an end to this once and for all." The group looked at each other, their determination stronger than ever. With the first light of dawn guiding their way, they set off on a new journey, determined to unravel the secrets that had ensnared them and bring an end to the darkness that had haunted their lives. Little did they know, the road ahead would be fraught with more challenges, revelations, and unforeseen twists as they ventured into the heart of the unknown, determined to uncover the truth and free themselves from the horrors that had held them captive. As they walked through the stormy night, the group couldn't help but feel on edge. They had faced their fears and overcome them, but they knew that there was still so much they didn't understand. "What do you think we'll find?" Mark asked, his voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. "I don't know," Gary replied, his eyes scanning the horizon. "But we have to keep moving forward. The answers are out there, and we can't let fear hold us back." Suddenly they heard a strange rustling sound coming from the bushes beside them. They stopped, their hearts beating hard. "What was that?" Amy whispered, her eyes darting around nervously. "I don't know," Kara replied, her voice tense, "but we need to be ready for anything." They continued on, their senses on high alert. With each step, the atmosphere grew more oppressive, and they felt as if they were being watched. "We're not alone out here," Mark said, his voice laced with fear. "We have to keep moving," Gary said, his voice firm. "We can't let whatever is out here get the best of us." As they walked, they heard strange whispers in the wind, and eerie shadows danced on the ground around them. They knew that they were being led somewhere, but they didn't know what lay ahead. And then they saw it. A dark, foreboding structure that loomed in the distance, its twisted spires reaching towards the sky. It was the mansion, the source of their nightmares. "We have to go in," Amy said, her voice filled with determination. "But what if it's a trap?" Mark asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "We don't have a choice," Gary replied, his eyes fixed on the mansion. "We have to confront this curse head-on, and that means facing whatever horrors await us inside." As they approached the mansion, they heard strange whispers and creaking sounds, and the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. The door creaked open, revealing a dark interior that seemed to stretch on endlessly. "Let's go," Kara said, her voice barely above a whisper. They stepped inside, their eyes adjusting to the dim light. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and strange symbols adorned the walls. As they walked deeper into the mansion, the atmosphere grew more sinister. They heard strange whispers and moans, and they felt as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. And then they saw it, the figure that had haunted their dreams, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. "We meet again," it said, its voice echoing through the mansion. "We're not afraid of you," Gary said, his voice firm. "You should be," the figure replied, its grin widening. "For I am the curse that has plagued this mansion for generations, and I will not be defeated so easily." The group brandished their makeshift weapons and advanced towards the figure, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. They knew that this was their final showdown, and that everything they had been through had led to this moment. As they battled against the curse that had haunted them for so long, they felt a strange energy building within them. It was the power of their bond, their unwavering support for one another, and their determination to overcome the darkness that threatened to consume them. And in the end, it was enough. With a final burst of light, the curse was banished, and the mansion was cleansed of its malevolent energy. "We did it," Amy said, tears streaming down her face. "We faced our fears and conquered them," Mark added, a sense of pride in his voice. As they stepped outside, the sun was rising on a new day, and the storm had subsided. They looked at each other, their hearts filled with a sense of triumph and relief. "We did it," Gary said, his voice filled with awe. "But what about the mysteries we uncovered?" Kara asked, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "The curse, the entities, it's all so surreal." "We'll figure it out," Amy said, a determined look on her face. "Together, we can overcome anything." And with that, the group set off into the new day, their hearts filled with hope and possibility. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they also knew that they had each other, and that was enough.